Well, hello and welcome. I think we'll start getting into the swing of things. Thanks everyone for coming during a busy season to talk about elections, but not campaigning, finding an opportunity for organizing around an election. We are talking with Ben Rowley of Better Ballot Georgia and Rank the Vote, Georgia Organizing Director and National Organizer. And I'm Celia Nolan, Training Director at Rank the Vote. And our topic is candidate surveys. We have a wonderful case study with what Ben did in Georgia that I think is just going to bring about a lot of interesting ideas for other states too. I'll be curious to see how the different states adapt it and what you all do. And this is a topic that came up in one of our regular organizer meetings. At Rank the Vote, of course, we support grassroots movement on the ground. We also organize our staff organizers and, state leaders and volunteers all over. So this topic came up in one of our meetings and generated a lot of discussion. And so we thought, would open it up even wider and have a special focus on this topic. And if anyone is not on those meetings and would like to be part of those organizer invitees, definitely let me know, because there's great discussion that happens in all those meetings. So I think, I see a lot of familiar faces here. If you can get to the chat, just drop what state you're in. That may be interesting, just to make sure we see what collection of states we have here. And I won't take up any more time. Ben, I'm going to throw right to you. Let us know what's happening in Georgia with candidate surveys.
Yeah, so the genesis of this idea kind of just came from a few different goals we were trying to drive at for a while. So in just as the general state of play in Georgia, we're a legislative state, so we don't have ballot measures. So we work a lot with the legislature, and we have the benefit of having partner organizations that do some direct lobbying in the state house with us, which has been great. So we're able to focus a lot on obviously voter engagement and education, like all of our orgs kind of are. So we had not planned on doing anything in the legislature for a long time, but the anti-RCV movement came to us, so we kind of just had to go with what was given to us. So the anti-RCV people kind of pushed the issue and was like, all right, I guess we got to step up and like try to find a way to kind of punch above our weight class, so to speak. Because if it's banned, it's going to be very difficult to get it back, to get it unbanned. We just kind of realized that we needed to do more direct engagement with candidates and eventually, obviously, elected officials. Because the opposition movement in 2023 and 24 just was far more well-funded and connected than we were. And we just needed to like use what we had at our disposal to make our case as strong as it could be. So the idea was that we were going to reach out to all candidates for state house on the House and Senate side and ask them three simple questions that were in alignment with our basic goals as an organization. And just sent it out to all of them and did a bunch of research on all the candidates and got some responses. And we were able to get large number of endorsements and kind of used it as an organizing opportunity, which was great. I have a lot of specifics I can get into, but that's the general thought.
So what was the discussion like if you brought this idea to your executive team or anything like that? Obviously, you're a legislative state. Legislators know that you have to go through them, right? You can't go around them with any ballot initiative, so they kind of hold all the cards there, right? So was there any discussion within Better Ballot Georgia about whether to do this, when to do this, and what questions to ask?
There was. So yeah, I kind of just had this idea in like a fever dream at 1 a.m. and I was like, oh, we need to do this. The next day I messaged our president and we just scheduled a meeting and talked through it and figure out exactly what we wanted to do. And in Georgia, the a lot of the consideration, like a lot of the, I guess I'll say in general, some reasons you would do it versus why you wouldn't do it. The reasons, the pro reasons on our side is that we need we want to obviously talk to our legislators about ranked choice voting. We want this to be on their mind, and we want to also kind of get there first because lot of legislators, just like a lot of people in general, just don't know about ranked choice voting and they don't have a strong opinion about it. And at least at that point, it really had not been a partisan issue at all in Georgia. It had really just been kind of a non-issue, honestly, where occasionally it would come up for a few different things, but for the most part, it just wasn't what the legislature was focused on. So we kind of felt like, okay, here's a nice, like, now, before it becomes like red versus blue, like let's get in and just talk to everybody and see and like get on the record, get some people to say what they think about these ideas, and just talk about the common sense nature of it. And so that was kind of part of like those were the pro categories. The anti categories is that even though it hadn't become a strong push yet, the beginnings of partisanship were starting to form. We ended up having a ban bill introduced on the Senate side, and it became basically a party line vote on the Senate side of things. So it's becoming more partisan as the national environment starts to leak in a little bit into Georgia. And we didn't want to provoke anybody or encourage that kind of energy. Nor did we want, if we were just going to get a bunch of negative responses from one party and a bunch of positive responses from another party, we didn't want to like further that narrative at all. So we kind of like settled on, okay, we'll just send out the survey. We don't necessarily have to publish it if it's not looking like we want to talk about this. We could just not publish this. But it ended up where we had supporters and detractors on both sides of the aisle, which served us plenty well anyways. So the I don't know if I answered your question. Those are some of the factors that went into why we decided to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the folks on this Zoom are pretty practiced at this format. So if you have a question, you can put your hand up, you can probably unmute, or you can put a question in the chat. I'm sure there are a lot of thoughts knocking around here in your heads, but in the meantime, I have plenty of them too. So I'm thinking about like the timeline also. So how long did it take from pitching this idea to sending the survey out to, you know, closing out responses and having some output?
So we did a very expedited timeline just because the idea didn't up until late in the process. And for clarity's sake, we did this for the primary election for state house seats. Uh, so we came up with this idea with just, I mean, early voting was going to start in like a week when we came up with this idea. So like we had to move quick. So we did. So we did a bunch of like we just put a bunch of man hours and volunteer hours into the research process, which is definitely the most time intensive element of it, and like just consolidating all of this contact information, which you would think would be easier to access, but it's not. It's actually a lot of work and research that you have to do to figure out how to contact your candidates for elected office. So we decided to do a bunch of like research and aggregation stuff to get all of this information in one giant spreadsheet, and then send out the survey and do follow-up calls immediately afterwards and all of that. So the turnaround time from like idea to publish was like less than a month. So we moved very quickly. We only had a 10% response rate, but I think most of that was due to the timeline. But yeah.
So who all worked on that, doing that research and, and setting the survey out? How many people were on that?
A lot of it was me, because it was my brainchild and they were just kind of like run. So I did a lot of the initial work of setting the thing in motion. This time around, we have a lot more people working on it. So we're doing it again for the general election, and a lot more of like our data behind the scenes type people who like to do research and things like that. We have like a lot of like asynchronous tasks that we just like, okay, can you research this list of 50 legislators and all their contact information? Great. So I did like all the research and everything for the general election we delegated to just volunteer power, and we created a Google form and So in terms of like man hours, almost all of the work is up front, is at the beginning. But once you get like the infrastructure set up to do it, it's very easy to replicate and do it again without much labor.
Great. I know you can show us some of this, right? We'll do that in a little bit. I do want to get to Katie's question. Big one, right? Did you ask only legislators or legislators and challenges during the election? And I'm also curious, do you think you got a different, like was one or the other more receptive to the survey? Did you notice anything like that?
So we asked all candidates. That includes like current sitting legislators and challengers. So we asked everybody. It is easier to get challengers to answer you because they're in general they're looking for just anyone to pay attention to them. Um, because in like 90% of seats plus, at least in Georgia, like there's not really a chance they're gonna win. Even in the primary, like it's just like it's things are very ossified. So it's much easier, I would say, to get challengers to answer you. But I mean, we did get some sitting members to answer us. The only sitting members that we got to answer us were supporters already. So there was that. None of the challengers or like none of the detractors were like, let me put this on the record, which I guess to be expected maybe. But yeah.
Did you get any like commentary or feedback other than just the responses to the questions, either from, the legislator's office or from them?
Not no, we did. At least not this first time around.
All right. Because I was wondering too, it's possible if there's, if they give a response to you right now, they may want to reserve the right to change their mind later. That may be something that they're kind of worrying about down the line. Did you get any sense of that, or is that something that you're considering how to deal with down the road if there's someone who is anti and you're trying to get them on your side? Obviously you don't want to have it be like you have this thing hanging over them or they're fixed, right?
Yeah. And like our intention is to publish basically this exact thing just every election cycle moving forward because of the benefits. So we did weigh the option, like that was the biggest negative, like in the negative column of doing this, that was the biggest factor, was like we don't want to like publicly lock people into like a I don't support this type of thing. Um but we kind of felt like more of the responses we were going to get, and this definitely did play out, and especially the phone calls that I did with ones that had publicly available phone numbers, is that the vast majority of them, just like the vast majority of voters, just didn't even know what we were talking about when we said ranked choice voting. Um, like they just didn't have a concept of it, and we are aware and are becoming more aware of the negative messaging that's being like poured into Georgia, and it's really important to get there first. We decided that getting there first was more important than I guess outweighed the potential negatives of locking people into positions. Because a lot of times, like people ended up coming down on the pro RCV side after doing research. Like we've had people be like, "Oh, okay, let me research and like look into this and figure out what this even means." And then like they've written like glowing responses of like, "This is amazing! Like we should do this for everything." So yeah, that's just the situation here at least.
Great. I'd love to see how you did this. So can you show us, what kind of trackers did you use,
Mhm.
and look at these specific questions? And I know like the report you came out with was great.
Yep. So I'm gonna drop a bunch of stuff in the chat for everybody. Well, not a bunch of stuff, a few things. So that's the tracker. Here is the link to the final guide that we did for the primary election. And I can also, I suppose I can screen share we don't need to show you the form. Basically, it's just a Google form that we created to field all the questions. But it's represented much prettier on the voter guide link I dropped. Um, so basically go ahead. You're muted.
I
Can
am.
you
Thank you.
change the security settings
Oh
so
no.
that we can view
Okay.
it?
Yes.
Yes, actually, so the spreadsheet, so while Ben's looking on that, so the spreadsheet I'm not going to screen share. We don't know where this recording may go out, and it has some contact personal information on it. But the back end of this Google form, right? So it has name party, whether they're incumbent or challenger, their outreach status, so tracking the conversation, of course, all the contact information for them, and then any notes, which it looks like are contact notes or in some cases, if you particularly connected with a staffer, including that too. So that's what the back end of that Google form looks like. And let's see, then the next one you dropped was,
So that's the final version of the voter guide.
yeah, the online voter guide. Yeah, would you want to
Yep.
screen share that, or I can
Sure.
screen share it if you have? All right.
Yeah, I'll screen share that. So basically the process of how we went about this is we congregated all the information that's on that spreadsheet is publicly available. So it's not anything that is not available on the internet already. Um, but here, let me do. So here's our voter guide. We have like the fancy PDF version over here if you want. My computer's of course being slow, but yeah,
All right.
we
Oh,
basically
there it is. All right, sorry. I was gonna say I don't see it up yet. I don't know if it's just me, but now I got it.
okay, cool. So we did this back in May of this year. So these are just all the responses that we got from all of the candidates. It's important to, if you're going to do something like this, be extremely explicit about what it is and what it is not. So it's very important to know that this is not like, especially if you're a C3, like so many disclaimers, all in bold. Like this is not an endorsement list. This is not partisan. Like none of that. Um, this is purely education. So that's what this little preamble is. And then we laid out our processes of how we did this. So basically, what we did is we sent out that guide to all of the publicly available email addresses for these campaigns and asked them to respond to these 3 questions. We formulated these questions with the intention of these are kind of like the 3, I guess, if there are issues around ranked choice voting, these are the 3 different categories they fall into in Georgia. So there's like the one side of it where we're working on a local opt-in bill that would allow for cities to use it at the local level. So do you support cities having that option? 2, do you think that state offices, so this would be offices that they themselves are actually being elected to, do you think those should be conducted being ranked via ranked choice voting to determine the outcome? And then just gave them kind of a fill in the blank answer of just what issues do you want to talk about in general with, like, what do you care about with elections in Georgia? So those are the 3 questions we asked. And the rest of the guide is just like their full responses. So I'm going to take us back to trying to figure out how to do it. So I'm going to take us back to this one. So you can still, if you want, you can go back and read all their full responses, but we like spotlighted some of the really good ones. So obviously we intentionally were like, let's get Republicans and Democrats on here, show a good smattering of opinions. We didn't highlight any of the negative ones, obviously. But the good ones, we were like, here, let's do that. So some of them just like really lined up with our messaging points really well. So we had enough options to make good choices. But then you can come down here and we have this little fancy thing where you can check their individual responses, and we have a key kind of showing their level of support and stuff. So that is what we ended up doing and what we intend to do again. So I'll stop sharing now.
That's great. Great summary. And I saw that it did have a URL off your website. Can you find it on your website? Do you just have it up publicly?
So we don't have it on the top navigation bar. So you kind of have to have the link. But I mean, if you just like look up Better Ballot Georgia voter guide, it's pretty easy to find.
And did you distribute it to your supporters? Like, did you actually push it out to anyone? Yeah.
We did. Yep. So we sent it out to all our supporters, and then like any orgs that have like shown interest or endorsed or anything, we pushed it out there, posted it on social media. Yeah, pushed it out everywhere to make it visible.
Yeah, did any supporters or anyone get back to you on that?
Um, I mean, there was the responses was very positive. Like, oh, I'm so glad to like have this information. Like, I'm glad to know where my candidates stand, or this is a great idea. I don't know. I didn't get any negative feedback. I'll say that from our list.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it is neat to have this history and for supporters to be able to see it, because if there is someone who's supportive or neutral, certainly, there could be another message say, like, look where they stand. You can call them and thank them for this
Hmm.
position, right? And start building those relationships and have them hear from people that there are actually a lot of people who do know about ranked choice voting. So maybe they just learned about it, but they're out there and they like it. So it's a great, great organizing tool.
Hmm.
And Katie asked, did you consider reaching out to third-party candidates, or is that part of your next survey? Were there any third-party candidates in these races?
That's the thing. No. So ballot access in Georgia is just so difficult if you're not Republican or Democrat that in basically the only time there's ever a non-Republican or non-Democrat running is if it's an independent who's managed to get on the ballot, or if it's like a statewide office, a libertarian can sneak in sometimes. But outside of that, it was all R's and D's.
And Katie also noticed, so there were disclaimers in the survey, right, that said, well, this is what it is, this is what it isn't. How did the candidates get that information? Did they, were you fully upfront with that you were going to be putting this out, for to a public audience potentially?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
So in the initial email that we sent out, we were very explicit about what this was going to become. Like, these responses will be published in a guide that will be sent out to the public, and we'll send out to our list. And yeah, we were as explicit with them as we were with the readers.
I'm curious, did you contact them once the report was up so that they could see it and they could see where their, fellow legislators or potential co-legislators stood?
I did. I sent out like a blast to all the people who responded, and I was like, "Hey, thank you for responding. You can check it out here." Um, yeah, that's about as much as I did.
And Elaine's asking, along with giving them the survey questions, did you provide any educational materials on RCV?
We just pointed them to the about our ranked choice voting section on our website, and left them mostly to do their own research. We didn't want to like be perceived as leading the witness. We were very, very scared about being sued when we were doing this. We were like, how can we do this in a way that's impactful and legal? So like anything that was even remotely like, I don't know. Obviously, we're pro RCV, but we just like wanted to like phrase everything as neutrally as humanly possible, especially for this being our first go around. But we could probably get a little bit more uh, involved going forward if we wanted.
So now that you've done this a couple times, right? Or you're in
We're,
process
we're
of
in the
getting.
process of doing it for the second time. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you change anything? What are your tweaks? What's your advice to someone doing this for the first time?
Yeah. Have your volunteers do the research. That's it's important work and they're willing to do it. So delegate because a lot of the upfront work is just like very tedious. But like a lot of times I forget. I'm like chronically extroverted, like want to go talk to people. There's a lot of like RCD people who are not like that, who really just want to like sit with their cats and like do data. And I love those people. And I know your people and delegate. I think that's good for organizing in general. But that's what I did differently this time is give yourself a longer time period than I did the first time because it's going to take a while to like get the level of responses that you want. Um, and have more, I don't know, a bigger team is not a bad thing. So getting people in at the ground level and getting them invested in it was really helpful. Because like basically I like sent out like a request. I'm like, hey, we did this last time. Basically, it was all me. Who wants to do it with me this time? And got some people to raise their hand, and like we just formed a little like task force basically to shepherd this through this time.
Yeah, great. It's going to be interesting to see, since you're going to be contacting some of the same people, right? Whoever made it through the primary.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see. Well, first of all, are you contacting the people who filled it out before or only the people who didn't? Um, and also I'm wondering if the ones who didn't fill it out know that in fact there are plenty of people who did answer your survey, if they're going to feel a little bit of, peer pressure to be involved this time so they're not left out of the book, basically, right?
Yeah, left out of the book. Um, that's a good question. I don't know about the peer pressure thing. I'm not involved in such conversations. So I don't know, but that's the goal. I think it's something that we want to do regularly enough that candidates start to expect it and like expect to be asked about it. Like part of the impetus for wanting to do it in the first place was to make it an issue. And make it an issue from a positive perspective. Because up to this point, the only time RCV had really ever been brought up in any of the primaries was mostly in really conservative districts and used as a weapon. Basically saying like, oh, I'm more anti-RCV than you are. Like, kind of like it is mostly just like a way to prove your cred. Um, so like that, to the extent it had been an election issue before this, it had been exclusively a negative one. And we were like, okay, this is just going to continue to build on itself until we just get a full ban, unless we do something. So part of the idea is to like do this on a regular enough basis every time we go through an election cycle that they start to expect it. And as our list grows and we can like build more pressure and do all the normal stuff that we're doing, it'll be the early adopters can really be like, I answered last year and now I have an even better response. And so I think part of the other another benefit that's come out of this is like it's opened up doors with specific legislators of like, okay, you answered our thing positively. I didn't know that you felt about this like positively before. Now we can come back during the legislative session and be like, hey, remember when you filled out that survey and you said you like this thing? Here's a specific piece of legislation that we need help with. Can you make XYZ thing happen? So it's also nice, like it's a 3-question survey, it takes less than 5 minutes to fill out. It's very, very easy, but like it's a foot in the door to be like, hey, you did this first step. Let's continue this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if they're running for office, they fill out the League of Women Voters survey and they fill out yours. It's
Yep.
part of running.
Yep.
And speaking of the partisanship that you were seeing, Elaine's question, what was the partisan breakdown in responses? And do you think you'll get a different breakdown in the general?
Yeah. We definitely got more responses from Democratic candidates than Republican candidates. In general, we got plenty of responses from both. So the partisan breakdown, I don't have the exact numbers broken out. If I were just like spitballing, I think it was like 75-25 in favor of Democratic candidates responding as opposed to Republican. Um, and basically, yeah, that was kind of the breakdown. In the general, we want to get more Republican responses. It's not that we're not asking, it's that they're not answering. So we're working on that problem. But yeah, that's what it was in our case.
I'll go to Katie's question. For those who said they don't support RCV, did they say why? And what were the most common rationales?
Almost all of them were along the same lines of like it's too confusing. So the left-wing detractors were basically like this will disenfranchise already disenfranchised low information communities, basically. So like the DC kind of argument, the DC Democrat kind of argument. So from left-wing detractors, that was basically the thing. And like that it would be the cost of educating the public would be a reason they would not support it. Kind of a thing. On the right wing, a lot of times it was along like election security lines of like this might. Most it's too confusing was like universally the number one answer on the Family Feud board, but like number two was somewhere along the like uh this will delay results or like make things too confusing. It will reduce trust in the system, things like that.
Did anyone say that they would welcome the money savings as compared to instant runoff? Of course, we talk about this in states that have runoffs, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, did that come up independently from any respondents?
So we kind of baked that into one of our questions actually. So our second question kind of baked that in of just like, um, in lieu of doing run expensive and time consuming runoffs, like would you rather would you consider using ranked choice voting instead to make this happen? So I get they didn't bring it up independently. We kind of like force fed them to answer that specific question with the way that we formulated the survey. Um, but yeah, that was the biggest like they some of the responses that were about mentioned the money saving element, but honestly, most of the this kind of gets into what just Elaine posted just in the chat. But like most of them were honestly more like conceptual than that. They were more like it just gives more voters more options when they go to vote and more representative and like the more like high-minded democracy stuff that I honestly didn't think was going to land as much kind of did. At least I mean I will say there was a strong partisan breakdown on that. So conservative positive responses were much more like in the weeds of like, yes, this would be a very practical solution for specific problems. And like the Democratic, like especially the like really fervent ones were a lot more like save democracy, type like um kind of energy.
So thinking of, organizing behind the scenes, um, you know, I really see this as an opportunity. When I talk to voters, often they're like hungry for information. They want to
Mhm.
know who to vote for, and they say, "Who's even on the ballot? What do they stand for? Are they sincere? Like, I don't even know. How do I even find this information?" Right? So I love that you are providing very specific information to them for free. Um, and I'm wondering, like, if they're availing themselves of it and how to track that, right? Always as an organizer, we want to see the impact and see the numbers. So, like, did you send out an email to your folks? Was there like a share on social media? Was there like a click to view so that you could track responses?
That's a very good question that I had not thought about, honestly. So there was not a lot of thought put into that in the first run around. We were just like, let's just create the content and the people will come. But I think the second time around, that's a good thing to think about how to honestly, I have not thought about that question. So thank you for bringing that up. Because I really was more just like, oh, we like had a bunch of people open the email, the end. Like, like we did it. Like so we had some metrics, but like I think we could probably get more in the weeds of like figuring out how many people actually viewed it. We like did encourage people to independently reach out to their own candidates if they didn't respond. And sometimes people would let us know about that, or like we would have people say like, oh, this was like we would also ask people like, let us know if you found this useful, or like we solicited feedback and stuff. So we also got that, but we could do better about like getting specific, I don't know, maybe even like click through rates or whatever, or website. We can maybe I think Nation Builder lets you do website traffic. I don't know, um, something like that. So that's a good thing to think about.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because I think, people think candidates aren't reachable or they don't respond very often. So even though I'm sure you wanted a higher response rate, like even having that is wonderful. So if you could be that trusted source of information to do that legwork and let people know what legislators are really saying, I think that is definitely an opportunity, something that would build if you do it each season, right? So that people
Mhm.
know Better Ballot Georgia, is doing this and could give you fundraising opportunities too, right? Like we're providing this service. So it's just there's so much you could do with us. It's fantastic. Any other questions out there? Is anyone planning on doing this? Do you have concerns about doing it?
I'm still concerned that it's just I mean, we have a Republican supermajority. Does Georgia have a Republican supermajority?
Define supermajority. We have majorities, the Republican.
Okay, yeah, we have a supermajority from Republicans. And with our Senate president being 2024 chairperson of ALEC and all of that, I'm concerned about, like you guys were concerned about provoking a ban or an attempted ban. Um, it occurred to me while I was talking with Eileen earlier that our Republicans could try to go the way of Missouri with a constitutional amendment ban. And while a regular legislative ban wouldn't really have much impact, to be honest, a constitutional amendment ban would. And so that's my concern. It's
Yeah,
just that,
and I think that like I want to emphasize that like it is very context dependent about whether this is actually useful or not. Like we would not have done this at the size that we're at unless the fight had already been brought to us. We were kind of just like forced into this by circumstance, but I think it's definitely better to build power and like relationships and things behind the scenes before you like go super public with things about like people's stances and stuff. If you can avoid that, particularly if you think it's going to be negative.
Ben, can you just, you might have said this before and I missed it. You said you were kind of pushed into this. What is the circumstance? Is there a bill that is being drafted or has been drafted in committee, or how far is this
So
opposition far? Like how far are they along in trying to pass this?
So they passed the Senate fully. The bill passed in the Senate,
Okay.
basically along party lines because the lieutenant governor has decided to make it a campaign issue because he wants to run for governor in 2026. And he's like, this is a thing that Republican voters will like. I want to get ahead on this and show that I hate ranked choice voting the most.
Okay.
And
So it is
basically
completely drafted, and it's just a matter of when it hits
like in 2020, so in 20 this session in 24, it already passed the Senate. It just didn't come up for a vote in the House side, basically because of like one single committee chair just not putting it up for discussion.
Okay.
But it's very likely that the ban bill would have passed had that not happened. So
And can that person put their finger in the dam forever, or is it only a matter of time before someone can force a vote?
The if they really want to push it, they can. Like it's up in the air. We plan on playing both offense and defense in 2025 again.
Okay.
Because we fully expect the ban bill to come back up, and we fully expect our local option bill to be up again. So it's a both and. Yeah, we were kind of forced into it just because like it became eminently necessary to do something about it.
Okay. Yeah, I missed that. Sorry. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
do you guys think the ban bills are going to come back up in other states where they failed?
Probably. Especially since there's so many states that are voting on it this year, and they're all going to pass because they always do.
Fingers crossed.
But yeah, they're not going to stop.
Yeah, the opposition effort gets better funded year over year. So I think we're going to see more of that.
That was not what I wanted to hear.
Sorry.
Oh, well, better to be prepared.
I mean, if you're getting backlash, you're doing something. They wouldn't feel the need to ban it if it wasn't genuinely meaningful.
And actually, there was a great rallying effort in Georgia, right? I mean, that I think was really another organizing opportunity, right? To put a call to action out to folks if there was contact your legislators.
We did
Any
a lot of that, yeah.
testimony to put in, yeah. So again, you were kind of forced into it, even if you weren't planning on it exactly.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. The issue was brought to us, and we just had to respond.
Yep, but I mean, the result is now you have more people who are more experienced, more aware. You have a history you can tell people about. So, all this is still good training.
Oh yeah, I had a good time. Looking forward to 2025.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, if it didn't matter, they wouldn't be trying so hard. All right. So for your survey you're doing now for the general, do you think you'll be releasing that information any differently or any different messaging?
I think it'll be maybe, well, I don't know. These are good questions. I don't think we're going to change it up too much because I think we got pretty much what we wanted out of it the first time. But I think as goals change, messaging obviously will change. But I think our goals are still very much the same of just like, we just want this to be a regular thing that people can come to expect. So if anything, maybe we'll try to um find ways of publicizing it even just beyond our list, and like tap other organizations on the shoulder more, and like do something to that effect, maybe do some fundraising off of it, like make more hay out of what, but like the actual release of it in the format, I think we pretty much like what we did. But we can do more like organizing power off the back of it probably.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you did send them the report afterwards. It's definitely an opportunity too, right? To thank them for participating and, and being in the dialogue and just keep cultivating that relationship, right? So even if their responses were in the negative, it means that you have a conversation open and they know who you are, and they know that you can contact them about it, and you will.
And we will.
All right. Well, great stuff, Ben. Thank you for this initiative and for sharing your experience with everyone. I don't know if you'd be willing to share your materials or the bare bones of it anyway. So if anyone's interested in that, we can send that along to you. And please share with other folks in your state, and just keep doing the good work you're doing.
Our team.
All right.
Yeah.